So I have no idea how, but somehow, despite having a neurodevelopmental disorder, not only did I make it through 5 years in medical school, but I also managed to do pretty well. And there are so many study methods that I've used over the course of my 22 years in education, a lot of them that I developed way before I was diagnosed with ADHD, but they have ultimately been the backbone of what has enabled me to get through medical school with ADHD. If you're new here, this channel is all about trying to empower you guys with the knowledge that I have learned from making my own mistakes in the hope that you guys don't also make the same mistakes. So if living a more balanced, fulfilled and successful life based off my failures is something that you would be interested in, then click the subscribe button down below to join the community. ADHD has seen a lot of media coverage over the past few years, and a lot of this coverage seems to imply that rates of ADHD are increasing because of too much TikTok and the lockdown frying our brains. Personally, that is not the view that I hold and not the view that is backed up by statistics. ADHD is still an underdiagnosed and undertreated condition in the UK, and yes, I do think that social media has played a role in the increase in the number of people going to their GP concerned about ADHD symptoms, but I think that this has come from social media balancing out health inequalities and providing more accessible health information to a far wider audience. However, due to the rapid increase in the number of people seeking ADHD assessments, a lot of the time waiting lists are long and accessing appropriate help can be very difficult. If you're concerned about any ADHD symptoms, you're very welcome here, because regardless of whether you do have ADHD or not, I'm sure that there'll be something useful for you to take away from this video. I'm going to go through the 3 strategies that have helped me get the best grades possible given my condition, and make sure you stick around for the last one because it is the one I discovered most recently and potentially my favourite. Strategy number 1 is the squeeze. Now, when you have a clinical attention deficit, by definition, you need to get the most out of your time before your brain eventually switches off and you lose interest. I want to tell you a little bit of a story about how I studied for my GCSEs and actually how I ended up studying for my A-levels. If you're not from the UK, GCSEs are exams that you sit around the age of 15 and 16. They are a lot simpler, they don't require as much revision, and I definitely didn't study all that hard for them, but the revision method that I used when I was 15 and 16 was flashcards. I used to have these huge stacks, honestly about this big for each subject, all colour-coded: blue for chemistry, green for biology, red for Spanish, yellow for Welsh, the list goes on, and that was the only way that I revised. I didn't even do past papers for my GCSEs really. I just did my flashcards again and again and again and again. That's it. So when I started my A-levels, my mum said to me, "Faye, your A-levels are hard. You can't just use flashcards to study." So I listened to my mum, I gave up on the flashcards. I thought, right, time to get serious. It's time to start reading some books. If you've been a viewer of the channel for a while, you may know the punchline to this story. I did abysmally in my A-levels. I flopped them. I completely disengaged with my studies. I thought that I'd used up all my intelligence and that I was gonna go nowhere in life, to be honest with you. But I took a step back, I persevered, I resat my A-levels, and I eventually got my place at medical school. And when I arrived at medical school, I decided I needed to learn a little bit about effective study methods. And funnily enough, when I was learning about effective study methods, the number 1 study method that came up was flashcards. I was kicking myself because I used to love my flashcards. It was the only way I could study. It was the only way that I could stay focused. You put a book in front of me and honestly, I will zone out in the first 2 sentences. Throughout the entirety of medical school, I have not used a textbook for revision. Let me just repeat that. In 5 years, I have never used a textbook to study for medical school. Reading is also an incredibly ineffective and inefficient way of studying, and this is not just my personal opinion, this is evidence-based and it applies to anyone regardless of whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent. For me though, not only was it not effective and it wasn't efficient, but I hated it. I absolutely hated it, and I find it hilarious looking back now and thinking about how my mum thought that that was the serious way to study, that was the proper way for me to study, and how I'd been doing it before was not correct. When in actual fact, flashcards is what I've used to become a doctor. Coming back to this strategy, the squeeze is all about making sure that you are getting the most bang for your buck. If you know that you can only focus for about an hour, then you need to be doing something that is going to keep you engaged and you are going to reap the most rewards from. Another way that I like to implement the squeeze to make sure that I'm getting the most out of my time and keeping engaged is when I had lectures at medical school, it would take about 5-10 minutes. I would have completely zoned out, even if I had tried my best to stay focused, stay concentrated and make notes. If you find that you're just making notes and you're copying out word for word what that person is saying, minimal activity is happening in your brain to process that information, and ultimately it is so much easier to lose concentration and lose focus. So fairly early on in my first year of medical school, when I'd done my research into effective study methods, I decided that making notes was not beneficial. I came to the conclusion that I was going to come back to my first love, flashcards, and I decided that instead of making notes like everyone else in my lecture theatre, I was going to create flashcards based on what the lecturer was saying whilst the lecture was going on. This is the method that I used to study in medical school, and I'll link my ebook explaining that in a little bit more detail in the description box below. But if you have ever tried to do this in a lecture, you will know that it is actually very, very, very difficult to keep up. And there's a lot of times where the lecturer would go ahead and I'd have to mark the slide with a star to catch up to the lecturer and then come back to that in my own time. It was very rare that I would actually get all my flashcards done within that lecture. The constant stimulation was just what my ADHD brain needed to stay focused. But more than that, I was having to process what the lecturer was saying, twist it into a question, and then type it up onto the flashcard. So I had an active recall resource. The flashcards that I created in those lectures in my first year, my second year, and my third year became my go-to resource for years and years and years to come after that. So I'm very sorry guys, there is also another study tip that I did really want to include, especially since finding out that this thing that I do every single day was created by someone who has ADHD. And actually when I found that out, everything seemed to make so much sense, because I actually don't know how I managed life without it. Now guys, if you are still using a traditional web browser, get with it. Sigma OS is going to completely revolutionize your life, as it has revolutionized mine, especially if you are a neurodivergent king or queen who really struggles to keep the different areas of their life organized. So what is Sigma OS? Sigma OS is a web browser that essentially allows you to organise your tabs into workspaces. So I have a medicine workspace for my career, I have a social media workspace for all my YouTube stuff, I have a life admin workspace for all the boring stuff, and then within those workspaces you have pages. So these are the tabs that you have open, and you can even rename those tabs to keep them even more organised. I'm not going to take up too much of this video talking you through how I personally use Sigma OS every single day, but lucky for you, if you do download Sigma OS, I have a full, complete video talking you through my entire Sigma OS setup. And of course, I would highly recommend that you try Sigma OS out for yourself. It is completely free to download. It is so easy and seamless to transfer over to Sigma OS and bring all your passwords and data with you. Personally, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. You probably use the internet every single day, and Sigma OS is free and just better. They also have pro options available if you did enjoy your experience with Sigma so much that you wanted to upgrade to a paid version, and I will pop the prices for that just here. But if you did just want to start off with the free version, then I will link the download down below along with my video on how I use Sigma personally. Sorry for interrupting, back to all my other ADHD study tips. Strategy number 2 is the gorilla. As a human being, regardless of whether you have ADHD or not, our brains are dopamine craving machines. We want the biggest reward at the quickest convenience, and a lot of the time this animalistic part of our brain gets in the way of us seeing the big picture and focusing on our long-term goals over our short-term gains. It's why when we drive past a McDonald's, we can't help but go through the drive-through even though we said we'd eat healthier, or why we spend hours in bed on TikTok even though we said we wanted to go to bed earlier. It's the same reason that when we go to the library, we may be quickly sucked in to talking to our friends, scrolling on social media, or any form of procrastination whatsoever. I really hate the narrative that this is an issue with willpower and discipline, because in my opinion, willpower and discipline require a lot of energy, and honestly, I would much rather be putting that energy towards things that actually contribute towards my goals. But in order to trick my brain into getting off my phone or stopping talking to my friends and actually getting started on work, it's important to dangle a little carrot in front of it and tease it away with the opportunity for another form of short-term gratification. This is relevant whether you have ADHD or not, but particularly if you have ADHD, because ADHD tends to be associated with increased levels of impulsivity. A lot of people don't know that actually people with ADHD have different shaped brains to people who don't. There are changes in various areas of the brain that seem to correlate with the areas of deficit that people with ADHD face. So for example, people with ADHD may have changes to their frontal cortex, and the frontal cortex is an important part in our brain when it comes to regulating impulsivity and decision making. Where there may be that deficit, this means that sometimes people with ADHD may experience more of this dopamine craving, short-term reward mentality than neurotypical individuals. We need to acknowledge the gorilla, address it, and realize that it's not going anywhere anytime soon, and do something to keep the gorilla happy. Studying is all about the long-term gains, but as we know, especially if you have ADHD, the short-term gain and the little cheeky dopamine kick is far more attractive to your brain. So the solution, you need to make sure that you're introducing other short-term rewards into your studying to keep the little gorilla in your brain satisfied so that you can keep going and remain focused and concentrated. My favorite way to appease the little gorilla is by doing my daily half-an-hour schedule and crossing off each half an hour as I go. Now, this seems very simple, but our brains are also very simple things, and the pleasure I get from using my red pen and crossing through that time somehow has managed to get me through 5 years of medical school. And there's a reason I deliberately split my day up into half-an-hour sections. Now, sometimes I'll do the same activity for an hour, 2 hours, half an hour, but I always still split my day up into half-an-hour sections. This means that every single half an hour, as long as I'm sticking to my plan, I am going to be giving myself a cheeky little dopamine fix. I've implemented this strategy for the past 5 years at medical school, but what's really interesting is I just finished reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. He completely reiterates everything I'm saying when he tells a story about a Wall Street stockbroker who earned millions of billions and millions of pounds, I'm not sure exactly how much, but allow for my exaggeration. By every time he made a phone call, he would move one pin from one thing to the other thing just because he made a phone call. How on earth is that enough to motivate him to get more work done? Moving one pin from one pot to the next. But somehow it works. But trust me, please, please, please try out my little half-an-hour schedule and see how you feel every time you get out your red pen. And I'm not talking about a to-do list. If you do a to-do list, that is dependent on you completing the task. Some tasks may take 2 hours, 3 hours, some tasks may take 5 minutes, but the issue is after 2 hours, my attention is gone. I am at the shop on my phone with no remote intent to continue studying. That's just my personal way of introducing a little bit of dopamine into my study day, but I do also like to reward myself with walking to the shop to get my favourite snack. That is also a nice little break as long as it doesn't become a form of procrastination. Another really great way of introducing a little bit of dopamine into your day, personally, I think is flashcards, because, and I know I go on about flashcards, but guys, really, if you have ADHD and you don't use flashcards, what the hell are you doing with your life? Because the thing about flashcards is it's such quick information. The aim, at least when I'm trying to make flashcards, is I keep the information on them as simple as possible to really test my active recall for individual facts, in comparison to when I'm doing practice questions where I want to test my application of these facts through active recall. But anyway, so I keep them quick. If I get one wrong, I just move move on and go on to the next one. And then every time I get one right, you guessed it, I get a little bit of dopamine kick that spurs me on to the next one. Again, practice questions in a similar way. When you get a question right, it gives you a little bit of a dopamine kick and spurs you on to keep going. Now, I know if you're getting a lot of them wrong, it may not be quite as satisfying. However, there's something about dopamine that I don't think is that widely known. We see dopamine as the hormone that is released when we get that quick fix of something good and rewarding. A huge role that dopamine has is also the role of craving. And so when we get our dopamine kick from something good, we immediately are craving wanting it again. So even though you may be getting some questions wrong, as long as you've experienced the sweet, sweet, sweet satisfaction of a green tick, then science says that you will probably be craving the next one. I don't recommend this all the time, but another way that you could get a quick little cheeky dopamine fix is by setting your questions to easy. Now, please don't make a habit of this, because the problem is if you set your questions to easy just to give yourself a little bit of a dopamine kick, then you will walk into your exam and you won't know anything. However, if you are struggling to get started and you just need that quick short-term reward to sweeten the deal with the gorilla to get you to sit down in flow state and actually start working, heed my warning. You are not going to learn anything by just doing questions that you already know and you're already going to get right. My third and final favorite newly discovered strategy is the enemy. So on a lot of my videos, I've spoken about the concept of body doubling. Body doubling is a lifesaver for me. The only time I ever get any errandy work done is when I do it with my best friend Sophie. Also has ADHD. Body doubling is a strategy implemented by people with ADHD to anchor them to a task where they complete the task alongside someone else. I'm not sure if the science is completely understood, but my personal hypothesis is that I get a certain element of stimulation from just being in the presence of someone else. I feel like that stimulation satisfies me enough that I can focus in on the task that I actually want to be doing. Another hypothesis I have is that as human beings, again, as I said, we are very simple-minded. I think maybe body doubling is pandering to our need to feel like we look good in front of other people. So, for example, if I'm with someone else and I've said I'm going to do something, I'm far more likely to complete the task. And maybe that is because I'm a little bit concerned that if they looked over and saw me on my phone, then they would think that I was lazy. So anyway, body doubling is just an absolute god-tier strategy that I've had in my ADHD toolkit for the past few years. This last year in my medical school exams, I came across a little bit of an issue, and that issue goes by the name of Sophia and Rafi. Now, Sophia and Rafi are my two best friends at medical school. I love them dearly with all my heart, and they have been great body doubles for the past few years at medical school, along with great friends. However, Sophia and Rafi do not shut up. So Sophia and Rafi, chatty all day, every day. Personally, I cannot think when other people are talking around me. Like, I get distracted so easily, I really struggle. So last year I actually made the mildly painful decision to go and sit and study by myself away from my friends. And let me tell you, it was soul destroying. I went and I sat in one of these little pods in the library and it was horrendous. Although I could hear myself speak and I could focus, I definitely missed the benefits of a body double in terms of my productivity, and I noticed a steep decline in the amount of time that I was able to focus for. This year, once again, we started studying and Sophia and Rafi started talking. However, I still had the dilemma of wanting to sit with my friends and have body doubles, but my friends seemingly not having an exam they had to study for. Enter white noise. Now, I cannot believe it has taken me this long to discover white noise. Oh my lord. If you have not heard of white noise before, basically it's the most irritating sound you could possibly imagine in your life, but for some reason, level of focus it gives me is unparalleled. I think potentially where it's so irritating and grating, it sends me into a little bit of a frenzy that I just want to get as much done as possible, but it's unbelievable. So I was able to sit with my friends, enjoy a cheeky body double or two, along with the company to boost my exam season morale, but I was also able to concentrate. And not only did I find that white noise helped me block out the distractions from other people, but it actually helped me block out the distractions from myself. Even when no one else around me was speaking, I still found myself putting on the white noise to send myself into a focused zone. This strategy is all about drawing from the strengths of body doubling whilst also acknowledging the weaknesses that come with having ADHD. That include being easily distracted, and the best distractions are our friends. If you made it to the the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'd really appreciate it if you yourself shared some study tips that you have found useful, whether you have ADHD or not, in the comment section below. Or if you can't be bothered to do that, fair enough. Maybe just leave a little brain emoji, please, in the comment section. If you did enjoy the video, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to join the community. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next video. Mwah!